Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start, and this is being recorded so that anybody who is not here at the beginning, they'll be able to catch up later. Thank you all for coming. I'm happy that you could join us again. And you know, there's a lot more to say than just about giving in terms of a gift economy, because we need to first understand how we're being controlled. The powers that be, let's call them, they have many methods of controlling everyone. And as we pointed out in last week's class, and with the video by Professor Yefimov, the first method they have of control is by controlling our worldview and how we understand our reality. And with the worldview, we control ourselves. We don't even try to think outside that box, because we don't even recognize that there is a box. So first thing is to recognize how we're controlled. Hi, Shirley, and Shirley's friend. Yeah, first thing is to recognize how we're controlled. So first, worldview, and then the second thing, with the homework assignment that I gave you for last week, is to recognize how we're controlled by money. And at first, I asked you to read or watch that video, 3.5 hours, The Money Masters by Bill Still. I started watching that a bit, and then I realized that was very American-centric. And so, and of course, very long, 3.5 hours. And as I watched it again, you know, it's too much information. You kind of get overwhelmed, right? You lose track. You have to take that stuff in small pieces. So then I sent out the other email suggesting that you watch Money as Debt, which basically covers the same material. Covers the same material, but not so much in depth. It still, of course, was somewhat American-centric. And, you know, I don't know, perhaps you have some similar videos there for New Zealand, if anybody's produced something like that. But the the system that we use in the United States, or the method in which the central banks have been set up in the United States, is basically the same method that's established all around the world. The difference being, to a large degree, that with fractional reserve lending, the central banks in other parts of the world have to keep American dollars on reserve as a basis by which they loan out money. So we have the situation where every central bank in the world requires American dollars, which has allowed the United States to print money and put it into circulation without ever experiencing hyperinflation the way countries have in the past. Weimar Germany is a very famous example, but there are others. Zimbabwe, I don't know if you followed that news maybe 20 years ago or so. Zimbabwe, they inflated their currency so much that they had to print a $100 trillion banknote. You can buy those for a couple bucks just as a souvenir. And it's a testament to how crazy inflation can get. But in the United States, they figured out a way to avoid that by requiring everybody to have US dollars. And the other reason for other countries rather, to need US dollars is because the United States established with Saudi Arabia that the American dollar would be the only currency in which oil could be bought. And of course, modern society runs on oil, and therefore every country needs oil, and every country therefore needed US dollars. So Americans got to spend all kinds of cash. We, pumped out money. And this is one of the reasons why the United States has a very high standard of living without corresponding inflation. So, all right, so back to the original point. I just want to emphasize this again. We must understand how we are being controlled and manipulated by the powers that be. First thing is our worldview. And this is, when we start to look at this in some detail, this becomes somewhat of an existential crisis, because we're trained, indoctrinated rather, from the time that we're children, that life is generated from matter. We've got this whole concept already solidified in our mind. But then if we come in contact with contradictory information, either we reject it as being silly, or if we do accept it, then we have to go through a big transformation. We have to reconcile this new information to make sense of our world again. So worldview, very important. And I hope, actually I'd like to hear, when we get to the point of questions, I'd really like to hear from any of you who have, this is new information for, and if it's been a problem for you to understand that, and to what degree, or what the issues were, what the, how you had to deal with it, or how you did deal with it in reconciling that new information. Okay, so with money as debt, it explains how money is created. But before we go there, the first thing that we want to consider, which is something that's not even discussed in economics, and that is the question of ownership. When I was writing my spiritual economics book, I searched through at least a half a dozen college textbooks on economics, looking for a discussion of ownership. I couldn't find it anywhere. It was simply not even discussed. And ultimately, in searching out that question, I had to go to the law library, because all of this stuff is codified into law. And the question is, what is it that gives us the idea that we can own anything, or how much we can own? What's the limit to what we can own? And the answer to this is, it comes to us in law, and American law, or let's say Western law, is coming to us from the Romans. Roman law is considered the greatest contribution of American, or let's say Roman law is considered the greatest contribution to Western society. And it was the Romans who decided by law how much a person could own and what kind of persons could own. And they decreed that any Roman citizen could own as much as they were able to get their greedy little hands on, and including other people, and that there was no limit. So that if, so this has come to us from Roman law. So we have this situation established now. You can own as much as you want, it's not even discussed. However, to give a little contrast to that, if we look at the indigenous, or let's say the worldviews of the indigenous peoples of the world, their worldviews were generally such or let's say their worldviews came to them from their spiritual traditions. And those spiritual traditions indicated to them, or let's say instructed them, that everything in this world is owned by God. So, for example, from the Vedic perspective, we get this understanding from the Upanishad, wherein it states that everything animate and inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. Therefore, one should accept only those things which are necessary for himself, which have been set aside as his quota. So not only is there given a concept of who is the owner, but also what we are allotted to. Let's say what is allotted to us, and you know, what the limits we should place on ourselves, so that the world functions in a proper way. The important factor here is that God provides everything necessary for every person that's born in the world. There is a God, and life does not happen by accident. The material world is created for the purpose of giving the living beings the opportunity to fulfill their desires within limits. And as they do so, if they take more than what's allotted to them, then there will be a problem in, let's say, others having what they need to live their lives in a proper way. So it's a somewhat of a bookkeeping issue, right? That some take too, there's everything necessary is allotted. If some take too much, others are left without. So that's the Vedic system. And as I mentioned, the other systems are somewhat similar to that. Now, let's look at the history of this, because the history of ownership is extremely instructive. Again, I'll make reference to the Vedic literature. Of course, that's a spiritual tradition that I study. And the Vedic literature includes history for not just this planet, but for the entire universe, the entire creation, for eons of time. And the lesson is given in of one of the first demonic beings. His name was Hiranyakashipu. There are people who want to own everything, right? Again, the material world is created for people to try to satisfy their desires. And so there are some, they want to, they don't want to follow the rules, right? God establishes rules in which if everybody follows, everything can go on peacefully. Well, some don't want to do that. And in the Vedic perspective, in Vedic terms rather, those who do not want to follow the rules, they are classified as demons. So we have two classes, two categories of people in this world: the divine, those who are willing to follow the laws of God, and the demoniac, who are not willing. And because the demoniac are not willing, they wind up generally creating a lot of trouble in this world, because they make their own rules. I sent you also the one chapter of my spiritual economics book, Divine and Demoniac Consciousness. And I hope you read that also, because this is also extremely important in understanding the nature of the demonic consciousness. So in that chapter, I discuss the several psychologists who have studied evil in the world and their conclusions. So I cite Eric Fromm, let's see, what's his name? Scott Peck, Robert Hare, another Dr. Cleckley, and how they're describing three basic orientations of evil, which is necrophilia, narcissism, and psychopathy. And It's one thing to say, well, there's evil in the world or there's bad people or so on. But if we understand the actual character, the nature of these people, then we can understand really, we can make sense of what's going on, particularly in our world today, and particularly with the efforts of the powers that be to manipulate and control people beyond whatever, what we deem as necessary or required. So this is a new step for us, because in the past, let's call them people, right, in quotes, who have controlled this world have been content to stay in the background and to allow normal people to participate in the mechanisms by which they control the world, that is money, right? You can get some money, you can own a business, you can buy a lot of houses, you can be a capitalist, and so you get some perks from participating in their system, of course, not to the degree that they do. So, but, it's one thing to say, okay, there's evil, but it's another thing to understand that they actually take pleasure in other people's suffering. And this is really what goes on. And we can understand from this that, hundreds or thousands of people marching in the street, it doesn't mean anything to them. In fact, it gives them joy, as strange as that may seem, that they see that these people are suffering. A normal human being cannot understand this. And so we can't look at the actions of these so-called leaders and try to ascribe to them normal human emotions. We have to step outside of our own way of thinking and understand how they actually work. They want to control everything and everyone. They want to change life and make it mechanical. They want to own everything, okay? When we understand this, and then we go back and we look at what's being said by Klaus Schwab, right? The Fourth Industrial Revolution, if you read that book of his, they want that by 2024, there will be no normal human beings left on the planet, okay? Only those who have been transformed. They got this idea of transhumanism, in which people will be able to be controlled by them. And as doctors continue to study the jabs and the effect of the jabs, these so-called vaccines, they see that they have amazing properties to allow for just that. I'm not going to go into more detail with that now. I need to come back to. Okay, so the first demonic personality described in the Vedic literature, again, his name is Hiranyakashipu. And how much did he want to own? Everything. Everything. From the top of the highest planet down to the lowest planet. And it's quite an amazing story. I'm not going to go into that detail, but he was able to achieve that for some short time. And of course, as a result, you can imagine it created great havoc in the lives of just about everybody in the universe. So he's the quintessential demonic person. And he's the model basically for all of the others. They want to own everything. They want to control everyone. So the quintessential icon for this. Now we have our modern day demons. What do they want to own? The same thing, okay? Let's take, for example, last week I looked up who owns the most land in the world. And because, we hear all these things about Bill Gates buying up so much farmland in the United States. So I did a search, and you may or may not be surprised to learn that the largest landowner in the world is none other than this, 92-year-old Queen Elizabeth, right? How much does she own? Drum roll, please. 3.3 billion acres. So what's that mean? All of UK, probably all of Canada, all of Australia. Is New Zealand, are you part of the colonies? Yes? Okay, so she's, ostensibly owns everything there also, and who knows whatever else they conquered. Maybe it includes India still, who knows. Anyway, so they've got this idea, right? They want to own everything. And the competition is still going on. Who's going to be able to control the world? Now, at the present time, Russia is creating a problem because they aren't going to be controlled, right? They're not participating with the plan. And so their Secretary of State Lavrov, he came out and said a couple weeks ago that basically the intention of their efforts in Ukraine is to remove the United States from their position as the sole world power and to establish a multipolar world. Now, this is basically a declaration of war, because if you did happen to watch the Money Masters, that video, you'll have learned that every war is a banker's war. Every war is a matter of who gets to exploit the resources of the material world and control it to benefit from the production, natural production. And so we've got three major powers in the world today who are vying for this supremacy: China, Russia, and the Anglo-Saxons, not just the Americans, but that includes Britain and Western Europe, who are under their control. So we've got these major powers who are competing against each other to see who's going to actually capture the control of the world. Historically, they've all cooperated together to some degree because they all want to achieve the same final goal. The question is, who's going to come out on top? So that's what's going on another front, okay? Besides the vaccines and all of that, the question is, who's actually going to grab the whole world? Now, and we see that their agenda is being accelerated today for some reason. I'm not sure what. Different people have different opinions about that, but the agenda is being accelerated, and they're trying to get that accomplished again by 2024. So, the actual subject of today's discussion is the other mechanism by which the world is controlled, besides worldview, which is money. And where money comes from, how it is created, and so on like that. Most people, they don't even think about this. They don't think twice about it. In the movie Money is Debt, he cited some Canadian, one of the Canadian politicians who went around asking people if they knew anything about how the money system works. And no, he couldn't practically find anybody who understood that. Even people who work in banks, who participate in the economic system, they've never explored this idea. They're just trying to figure out how to make it work for themselves. But it's important for us to understand how it works. Because, why? Because I want this to be a motivation for you to understand it's a control mechanism, and therefore for it to be a reason for you to give up, right? Give up the use of money. We use money at our own, it enslaves us. And when we use it, we contribute to our own enslavement. So let me put it in a very simple way like this. The bankers have created this game called money. And the rules are very simple, right? The bankers win and the people lose. And so the bankers say, let's play the game of money. And all the people go, Oh, goody. Yeah, let's get some money. And the bankers make a lot of loans, and everything is prosperous, and people are, making progress in their lives in terms of their comforts and being able to fulfill their desires and so on. And then the bankers decide, okay, it's time to shear the sheep. And so they stop making loans. And because the way the system is set up, if they don't continue to make loans, gradually the money in circulation dries up. When there's not enough money to go around, the economy falters. And the bankers say, oh, we're sorry, it's a recession. Oh, we'll work on it, we'll try to fix it. In the meantime, they're taking 10% of people's houses and businesses, right? Buying them up for pennies on the dollar. And so after a few years of making everybody suffer, they say, oh, okay, we got it fixed now. Let's play the game of money again. And what do the people do? They say, oh, goody, yes, let's play money. And they participate in the game again. And it goes on for a few more years, and then the bankers stop making loans. And they're going, oh, too bad. It's the business cycle. And we're now in a depression. And 30% of the people lose their houses and their businesses. And the bankers say, well, we're doing the best we can. We're working on it. We'll try to get it fixed soon. So after a few more years of making everybody suffer, the bankers say, oh, we got it fixed now. And they start making loans again. And then the economy recovers. Oh, wonderful, good. Let's play the game of money again. And the people say, oh, goody. What's the matter with this picture? Right? We don't get it. We don't understand their game of money is at our expense. That's the way it works. Okay? And so as long as that goes on, as long as we participate in it, we're going to lose. So the only way to get out of this is to not play their game, right? That requires that a certain number of us understand the game, realize what's going on, how we're being manipulated, and then decide we're not going to play the game of money anymore. And what do? We cooperate together to arrange for another way, another method of satisfying our daily needs and requirements. Okay? People create everything anyway. Money doesn't do anything. People do everything. And so it's simply the focus energy of all the people in the world who take the things that nature gives, fibers for making cloth, food from the earth, milk from the cow, wood from the forest. We take those things, we transform them into something useful for our daily activities. And this can be done in many, many different ways, which we're going to cite in next week's class. Give some examples of different cultures who do these things in different ways. Now, instead of understanding that money itself is the problem, what people do is they study money. There's so many people studying money, and they come up with better ideas of how to make the economy work. And it's not difficult. It's not difficult to make an economy that works. But what you have to do is prevent dishonest, demonic people from having control of the money system. That's the problem. Money itself, you could have an honest economy. It wouldn't be difficult. I can do it. I can arrange it. But there's too many people in the world who want to exploit the system for their benefit at the expense of everybody else. Now, different things people have tried. What? Maybe you've heard of private currencies. There's the Let's local economic trading system created by Michael Linden, a fellow named Michael Linden, back in the mid-'80s. I attended a conference with him back then, had Michael over, he stayed as a guest in my house. And it's a system that works, but again, it's a matter of quid pro quo, right? I'm going to exchange, let's say there's an exchange of equal value. I've got something you want, you've got something I want, and so we'll exchange. Okay, that can work. Or there's other people, other kinds of private currencies. There's in the town of Ithaca, New York, which is a college town. They established what's called the Ithaca Hours, a private currency in which everybody's time is valued equally, and people could trade Ithaca Hours for the things that they wanted. There's another one called the Time Bank. Same basis, everybody's time is valued equally. With the Time Bank, you don't need money at all. You simply give of your time, and as you give of your time to services or things that people need, then you can claim the time of other people. So a babysitter's time is equal to a lawyer's time in that system. Right? The babysitter comes to your house and, you know, to the lawyer's house and babysits his children for 5 hours, say. Then the lawyer, then they can claim 5 hours from the lawyer's time for whatever they need, for example, okay? There's many different examples like this, but they continue the same concept of, I produce something and I want to get some value for that, equal to what I've produced. So, is there a downside to that? Materially speaking, no. Spiritually speaking, yes. And again, this is the basis for my writing about spiritual economics. First thing to recognize that we are spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings living in a material world. And we discussed this last week, if I remember correctly, to some extent. I'm born into the world, I need to have some kind of identity. And that identity is developed on the basis of not only who I am as this body, man, woman, young, old, but it's also developed on the basis of what I own or possess, or what I think I own. And so as I get more, then I am more. And this becomes a trap for the living being. We are engaged in so many what's called fruitive activities, that is, activities in which we want the fruit of our labor, okay? And this all operates on the subtle material law called karma, okay? If you've watched the movie The Secret, or read the book, or read the books Think and Grow Rich, or The Power of Positive Thinking, or any of those books of the same genre, you understand that we can and do create our own reality. But this sets into motion the chain of karma, and by that karma, let's say it's that chain of karma that forces us to be born in this world again. The reason being that you will get everything that you desire. That's the good news, right? You will get whatever your desire is. You're going to get it. Some lifetime. Maybe not this lifetime, but in some lifetime you're going to get it. Okay? The question is, do you want it bad enough that you're going to have to come back and take birth in this material world again and go through all the struggles that we all have to go through in life? Well, maybe you didn't want it that bad, but that's the result. So materially speaking, this concept of what's called I and mine is not bad, right? We all want to work. We want to get the result of our work. But spiritually speaking, we're keeping ourselves trapped in the material world. So this is another reason for adopting and participating in a gift economy. By participating in the gift economy, I'm not thinking of what I'm going to get or how it's going to enhance my ego. I change my focus to how I can give joy to other people, to help them with what they need. And by doing so, I'm karma free. There is no karma. So this then becomes a means of liberation rather than a means of bondage, spiritually speaking. Money and worldview are means of bondage or control materially, and spiritually as well. But the gift economy allows us to become free from all of that. Okay. So, there's a lot of, back in the 90s, there was many books that came out explaining the downside of economics. Most of you look, got enough gray hairs to remember those times pretty well. And back then, 30 years ago, the World Bank and the IMF, they were going around the world and they were encouraging countries to take loans to improve their countries. But what they did was they tried to entice them to borrow more than what they could pay back. Then when they couldn't pay back the loan, they said, well, okay, look, you participate with us in the next vote in the UN, or you allow us to exploit your markets, or something like this. Basically, it was entrapment. There's wonderful books written about that. One professor at the University of Toronto, his name is Michel Chossudovsky. His website is it'll come to me. Anyway, he wrote a wonderful book called Globalization of Poverty and the New World Order. And in that book, he documents how the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, who are ostensibly meant to assist countries in becoming, in their economic development, how they are in fact engaged in economic enslavement to the point of impoverishing even the poorest people of those countries. For example, when they couldn't pay their loans back, they'd say, well, you're going to have to do austerity. Okay, that means stop paying for the books for your children to go to school. They're going to have to buy their own books, or they're going to have to buy their own school lunches, or the aged will have to pay for their own health care. So perhaps you had this situation in your country, but in Europe, I remember particularly, I was in London one time, there was a protest, 200,000 people were marching in the street against austerity. And there were similar protests in practically every country in Europe, because everybody was being squeezed for paying back these loans that the people didn't agree to, but the governments agreed to, because the governments are in cahoots with the world order. So this is going on. Did you have that problem in New Zealand? Did you have austerity down there? I see heads nodding. Yeah, okay. So you know exactly what I'm talking about then. They did it in a different fashion in the United States. And that happened after the events of 9/11 and the collapse of the American banks in 2008. So they have different methods in different countries, but basically this same system is going on, which is how to extract the wealth of even the poorest people of the country, right? Again, you can't understand this mentality. It's not normal human consciousness, you can't even think like that. But that's how they think, and that's how they do things. So another book is written by a woman, Naomi Klein, called Shock Doctrine and Disaster Capitalism. And she was explaining how the United States in particular was create various disasters around the world or exploit various disasters, again, to impoverish people or to use disasters to steal from people. And I explained this in the Spiritual Economics book, how they've got this idea that you can't let any crisis go to waste. So they've got their plans already prepared and in the waiting. And whenever a crisis comes, then they'll jump in and immediately take action to exploit the situation. Where they, in the name of development, they'll steal the land of the people, or they'll, put everybody on austerity and so on like that. That particular book, Shock Doctrine, is so disgusting. I found it difficult to read more than 5 pages at a time, because it's just like it makes you ill to realize how they're exploiting people of the world. How are we doing in time? Oh, we're getting late. Okay. Let me try to see what I got to discuss here yet. Money problems. Okay, so yeah, where are we going next with money? You've all heard, I'm sure, about the plans of the World Economic Forum, and maybe you've seen that little video. It's 2030. I own nothing, and I'm happy as I've ever been. Everybody says, "Yeah, right." And then exactly who's going to own everything then, right? not us, right? That's not part of the plan. Somebody else is going to own it, but we're not going to own it. So that's what they want to do. They want to bring us to the situation where we literally own nothing, and they're doing this in various ways. They are deliberately creating, as you may have seen, food shortages. They're working on deliberately creating famine. They're deliberately creating problems in the supply chain, so we will not get the things that we need to carry on proper economy. The businesses will fail, people's incomes will be interrupted, and all of this is to create the problem that they're going to take advantage of to usher in their solution, which will be the cryptocurrency from a central bank, in which they will be able to control everything that we buy and sell. And first of all, everybody will be put on what's called a UBI, a Universal Basic Income. And if we do everything that we're told like good citizens for the betterment of all, for the good of all, then we'll get our monthly stipend. And if we won't, if we are too independent, we won't get that. And of course, one of the primary things that they're going to require is that even though Bill Gates came out last week and said that COVID is basically over, still they've got this idea that they want to jab everybody with the COVID vaccine. Why? Because that so-called vaccine, or quaxine as we may call it, has another purpose, and that is to transform human beings into human 2.0. So this is coming up. Now that's another reason why we want to be able to maintain ourselves independently of the money economy. What do we need? The necessities of life are not that difficult to provide for. And even in the tundra of around the North Pole, the Eskimos, right, the native people up there, They're able to provide for themselves a house, basically some kind of shelter, right? Food and clothing. And this can be had anywhere in the world by people simply using local materials. It's not difficult. The problem is that we've become accustomed to an artificial way of life that's created by using money. So we want to live at a particular standard, but living at that standard is now going to require us to fall into line, do what we're told by the powers that be, who do not have our best interest at heart. They've got another agenda that they're not sharing with us, but if we read between the lines and connect the dots, we'll be able to understand that. And that's the part of the purpose of these lectures, is to help everybody understand this. And if we, to understand where we're going with this, as wasn't the author of the 1984, he said, if you want to imagine the future, he said, to understand the future, imagine a boot stomping on a human face forever. Again, demonic mentality, who think of human beings as nothing more than vermin or cockroaches, whose best utility is to be exploited for their own purposes. So we have to understand, we're at war. There's a war going on against the people of this world by the demonic powers that be, who intend to enslave and exploit us for their every whim, regardless of what it is, some of which are too disgusting to even mention. And maybe you've heard of some of that in regards to children. Again, my purpose in asking you to read about, to watch these videos and to read that chapter of my book is to understand the reality of this world. We need a wake-up call. The world has changed. The world that we had even 5 years ago no longer exists. There's a different agenda, and the powers that be, the demonic powers, they want to bring everybody to overt slavery and control. Okay, so I'm going to, with the email that I'm going to send out after this lecture, to give the link to the lecture, I'm also going to give some other homework suggestions. The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, there's an audio book for that, plus you can watch these videos. Naomi Klein, you can watch some of her videos on the Shock Doctrine, and The Great Reset, the plan to seize all the private property in the world. And then another one by BlackRock. Perhaps you've heard of BlackRock. They seem to own just about everything on the planet. So again, more information to get it clear and through our heads that this world is not a nice place, and the leaders, right, the so-called leaders, they're not solving the problem, they are the problem. And so it's the normal people of this world have to come together, take care of each other, and we can do that in a way that provides an example for others how to live a wonderful life in this world. I want you to understand that what we're trying to do here, it's more than just for us, right? To create a gift economy is an example for the entire world, how to become free from enslavement and how to live a very nice and happy life, a personal life, where all of our needs, both material and spiritual, can be fulfilled. And so at the same time, we make spiritual progress so that in the next life, either we have a better birth, a much higher, happier birth, or we leave this world for the spiritual world, never to be born here again. Okay, so I've gone a little bit over time, a little bit, but so let's see if you have any comments, questions, remarks. There's if you go down to the reactions at the bottom of the page and click on that, you can raise your hand. Teresa, you have to unmute, Teresa.
Hey. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Cool. Awesome. Well, I have a few questions, but you might cover this in other talks later on. So if that is the case, then we can come back to it.
Okay.
So one of the questions was, I really appreciate that shift away from this, oh, what can I get, to what can I give, to the joy and the thriving of everyone else. And so as someone that is very good at giving, to a certain degree, I guess, I'm sure I can improve. But there's also then this balance of like making sure that I'm not doing without, like this balance of need and giving. But maybe you'll talk about that, right? Because I know that sometimes I can give and give and give, and I'm not actually looking after myself, and so I'm over giving, and that's yeah.
This is let me give you a short answer to that. I will cover that in more detail later. What you're expressing is a problem for a lot of caregivers. In fact, say if you have elderly parents or children, you give, and you're not taking care of yourself, or what you need is not getting taken care of. Now, the short answer to this is to understand that we're creating an embryonic culture. And in a specialized culture, everybody there's room for a very narrow specialization. But in an embryonic culture, everybody has to become a generalist and wear a lot of different hats, just like mom or dad, right? Yeah. Mom's a good example, right? You have to perhaps balance the budget, you take care of your kids, you see to their education, you're doing so many different things, okay? Not just one thing. Mm-hmm. So it's like that in an embryonic culture. Yes, we want to see that everybody's, let's say we want to focus on giving, but we also have to make sure that all of the needs are covered. Mm-hmm. And the answer to that is the gift economy in its embryonic stages is a closed culture. That is, it's not open for everybody. Mm-hmm. And everybody, let's say, must agree to cooperate to the point to see that everything is being dealt with. So, it's pioneering work, and pioneering work is challenging and difficult. The more people that are involved, the easier things become. So, what's the minimum number of people? We'll see. I don't really know. I'll give you an example from traditional Indian culture, where I have some knowledge of the history. They say, maybe you've heard this saying, think globally and act locally. Or there's another saying, produce only what you need and use only what you produce. Now, if we used only what we produce, this would change the nature of the entire world. There would be no environmental problem. Right? Now, what does that mean? Use only what you produce. That means within, in traditional Indian society, this means a group of 5 to 10 villages who are located near each other. And I read this statistic some time ago that among 2,000 people, somebody is going to be producing everything that's needed. So, okay, there's your big number, 2,000. And then, so in that, you're going to have some carpenters, you're going to have some, men that cut trees, you're going to have somebody that makes bricks or makes pots or all of these different things. And so then, that can be accomplished. Of course, this takes some time to develop. And the big question is, how are we going to get there from here? And the immediate answer is we have to buy our way out of the money economy. And we have to do that thinking about how are we going to acquire the necessities that we need to live independently. In other words, to establish our infrastructure for independent living. Okay? This takes little management, foresight, guidance, and a lot of discussion. So it's not, you could say it's simple, but it ain't easy. Okay, that's a short answer, and we'll discuss more later. How's that?
Yeah, perfect. You've also answered my other question, which was about that transition out of the money. But you've said, yeah, we've got to buy our way out or prepare ourselves out. Yeah. No, awesome. Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I look forward to hearing more on the other ones.
Come back next week.
Yeah.
Who else? Don't be shy. I save time for questions because a lot of the better part of the class often comes up in discussion or answering questions. Anutama, what do you have?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just like to introduce myself. That I'm Anutama, and this is Billy. And we live on a 14-acre farm in Western Washington in the United States. And we've been, for the last decade or a little more than that, we've been producing most of our necessities and really trying to invite devotees to come and join us. And we had a few devotees come into the area, but they basically didn't get what Dineshwar is talking about. They wanted to maintain the materialistic lifestyle, and they didn't want to cooperate and actually do the cows. And so we ended up taking the whole burden on ourselves, which now we don't regret because the world really is falling apart. So, and one thing we've done we have a valley, it's very nicely defined area. And I've made a huge effort to get to know the neighbors. And, usually I wear sari and tilak. And, basically I've gotten to know everyone. And when things really start to fall apart, my intention is to go around to the neighbors and assert ourselves as the authorities, that we're here to make sure that everybody has their necessities, has their medicine, try to make it like a community. And I think from there, if we're very giving, that when we need help with the cows or something, we've already had that experience, that when we need something, because we've been very giving to the neighbors, we get what we want.
Yeah, people jump in and help out.
Yeah, everybody wants to help. I mean, it's one of those contagious things, just like this fear that they're putting around is contagious. So anyway, yeah. I just wanted to mention too that it looks like things are falling apart a lot faster, at least here in America, than we anticipated. We went to get gasoline yesterday, and it was over $5 a gallon. So, half a tank of gas was $50. That's half a tank of gas. And now they're talking about, I guess Biden shut down the pipelines. So there is going to be rationing with diesel fuel, which means it's very, very short time until we have full on chaos. So anyway, if you'd like to address any of those points.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to avoid. And again, the solution is not going to come from above, from the government. They're the problem, and the solution is really going to come from taking care of each other. And that's the point that I want to make, right? And that even if, let's say, are we going to restrict who we take care of if they don't have something to give? Okay, well, what about infants? What about children? There's many members of society who require care. They don't have anything to give back. But that's the burden of those who do. And by God's arrangement, what we need is not difficult to produce. Okay, anybody that grows a garden, with little effort of planting some seeds, you can produce much more food than you can use. So this is the bounty of the Lord. Okay, for example, take an example of economic development. Real economic development is planting a seed. Okay, you plant a seed of corn, and you get a stalk of corn. What do you get? Generally 2 ears of corn out of that. Well, I counted the rate of return. You plant one seed and you're going to get back approximately 1,000, which is a 100,000% rate of return on your investment. How much do you get from the bank? 1% maybe? Okay, so nature is generous, right? It's not difficult, but because we're not connected with the natural world, we don't know that. We have to relearn that. In fact, in my spiritual economics book, I quote a lot from Peter Kropotkin. He's a Russian revolutionary, basically, during the 19th century. And in his writing, he explains that in the late 19th century, before electricity and before oil, right, people generally only had to work about 5 hours a day, and they could provide for everything that they needed. And the labor requirements were so minimal that generally most cultures, they had many festivities, many festivals, many holy days a year that they would just come together and enjoy celebration. Well, the demons, they don't like that. They're envious of that. They said, why should these people, they're sitting around doing nothing. We want to exploit them. So they create the money situation where you have to work. So when I first went to Russia in 2005, and I traveled around Russia widely, and I'd ask the people over there, are you working harder now, especially around 2010? So this is almost 20, 30 years after the fall of the Soviet Union. I asked them, are you working harder now under capitalism, or were you working harder under communism? And everyone said, we're working harder under capitalism. Right? So anyway, the point is, it's not difficult. Survival is not difficult. If we understand it, if we prepare for it, if we create these circumstances to arrange for it, and if we help each other. So we have to relearn that way of life, because it's so foreign to all of us now. And so, Billy and Anutama, you're giving a good example to people, and like your experience, most people, we don't want to do that. Why? Because we have options, and as long as we have an option, we're going to take the easy way out. And it's a lot easier to sit in front of my computer all day, or whatever I do for money, right? And then I order something from Amazon, or just go down to the local store, and I get my necessities. Well, we're coming to the point where you're not going to be able to get your necessities from the local store, right? I went to the hardware store last week, and I was shocked at how empty it was. The supply chain is drying up. So what to speak of the supply chain for the hardware store, it's also going to be there for the food store. So I'm reading the clarion call. There's an alarm going out. We have to prepare today for tomorrow, because tomorrow is not going to be the same as yesterday. It's really that simple. Get ready. Okay. I've said, Haley, hi, and your daughter. Hi. Is that your daughter? You have to unmute, Haley.
Hare Krishna.
Hi.
Sorry about that. Best Zoom call ever. I just wanted to thank Teresa for her question, because that was a burning question of mine. I know you can give and give and give and give to people who will take and take and take. And then when you cut them off, they'll be jumping your fence in the middle of the night and stealing from your backyard, you know. It's a fact. And we live in Whanganui, in the hood, where this place is a cesspit of thieves and liars and cheats and a lot of, no offense or anything, but skillless guys who bring absolutely nothing to the table. They have no skill, they have no intention to do anything for anyone except for take and cheat and steal. It's crazy here. So, I really appreciate that question, and I do believe also it does need to be a closed community to begin with. Yeah, not only that, but beefed up with some security, because I know a lot of Hare Krishnas have a sentimental viewpoint on it and like, oh, well, we'll just give and we'll just feed them and, you know, they'll give back. I can tell you right now, they will not. They will exploit and take and never, ever. They're just hardwired for that. So also coming from a background in the criminal court, I know that very well. So just wanted to thank Teresa for that question and your answer about having it closed. Yeah, if you wanted to speak more on that, that's something
The you know, the problem that I see is there's not enough people on this call. You know, it's disappointing to me. We had about 100 register, and last week I think there was 2 pages on my notebook screen of people who were there listening, and maybe they you know, they didn't like the class. They thought that, well, what's your worldview got to do with the gift economy? But it's got a lot to do. And like you're saying, right, these people who, and it's not it's people of every religion or every walk of life, you know, you can appear to be a saint, you know, as long as everybody else, their things are in a normal condition, right? But when the chips are down, then who's really going to be the saint? Like we see, I remember back in the early part of the COVID scare, right? We had all the women in the stores fighting over toilet paper. At least that's what we had in America. So,
yeah, here too.
And a lot of people live without toilet paper, but there's other things that are a lot more necessary for life to go on. And so, you know, how are they going to be reacting then? I want to encourage all of you in your local area we have to be the leaders. We can't depend on somebody else who's going to take the lead. If you understand the situation, you are the leader, and you have to help other people understand that as well. So it's not a time for business as usual. It's a time for everybody stepping out of their comfort zone and taking initiative, taking responsibility for others. Because if we don't do that, life's going to get difficult even for us. And in that regard, I'll say it's a good time to have extra food, you know, buy as much extra food as you can, because, you know, not just for yourself, but also for taking care of others, because a lot of people aren't going to be doing that, and they'll need help. I remember back in Y2K, there was a lot of people who were saying, you know, run for the hills, get your gun, and if anybody's going to come, you know, shoot them, right? And I say, well, why do that? You know, don't do that. Don't, you know, buy a lot of silver or gold, buy a ton of grain, and when people come, feed them. Right? Take care of them. And then when you do that, you've got them on your side, and they'll defend you from the marauders who are coming to exploit. So that's what I still suggest. Buy food, feed people, right? Okay, I'm going to come back to you in a minute. Nikki had her hand up first.
Oh, do I just take my hand down, do I? Ah!
Is that Nikki or Haley? Nikki,
Sorry.
Go ahead, talk to us.
Okay, can you hear me?
I hear somebody. Yeah, I think it's you.
That's me. Yep. So, you know, this conversation is fairly ubiquitous at the moment. In a lot of communities, a lot of places, we hear a lot of talk about, you know, this conversation, what we've been having, even from people who are very aware of the situation. But what I'm experiencing is that a lot of people are actually lacking the skills needed to cooperate.
Right.
Yeah, the ability to cooperate seems to be lost. So what we're seeing here in some of the developing communities is that, you know, we're so out of touch with lots of these things, with nature and with working together, actually, that we can't seem to get off the starting block. Things seem to fall apart before we, yeah. So maybe you could speak to that.
Okay, is that a question or just a comment?
It's a comment, but I'm wondering if you have some idea of solution or how to address an approach.
Yeah, sure. Let's look at a full-fledged gifting economy and then work our way backwards from that. In a full-fledged gift economy, what do? Well, do what you like. How's that? Most people in the modern world don't even give that a second thought. They go to university, they're saying, well, I need money in this world and I'm going to do whatever is going to get me the most money, even if they don't like what the work is. Okay, which means they're wasting their lives. They hate their work. 80% of people, right? I read this statistic. 80% of the people don't like the work that they do, but they have to do it because they need the money. Okay? Now, in a gift economy, you get to do what you like to do. Now that creates another problem because I don't even know myself. What do I like to do? I don't know. I've never thought about that. Oh, okay. Well, let me try something out. Maybe I want to be an artist, but could never afford to do that before. Maybe I like to play music, but you know, we all hear about the starving artists, right? You know, I'm a writer, and writers like being an artist. That is, you know, you don't really make much money from it unless you get to stardom, and so, you know, you have to have another means of support, or you have to learn how to live very simply. So, in a full-blown gift economy, we get to do work that serves ourselves, so that it's not really even work. It's a joy to do what we love to do. And then to be able to give the fruits of our labor to others is a second joy, because it makes other people happy. Now, the question is, okay, how do we get there from here? And particularly at this point in time, you know, first thing is necessity. Grow food, plant something, plant a seed. Everybody plant a seed, grow tomatoes on your balcony if you don't even have a plot of land. Learn how to do something now, practical skill. There's a lot of women who do weaving and textiles as a hobby. Learn how to do something like that. Learn how to knit. What do you need? Food, clothing, shelter. And so all of us, you know, we can do something. Again, you know, we have to understand, we have to look down the road a little farther, a little further than normal, and see that tomorrow is not going to be the same as yesterday. Therefore, what do I need to do? So that's the first order of business. What do we need? Okay. Learn how to, you know, for the men, learn how to build a house from earth and wood. Learn something like that. Get the tools that you're going to need to be able to do that. Where if you went into a forest, like pioneers did in days of yore, right? Very hardy people, they would cross the American plains on a wagon with some tools, you know, either build a sod house, just cutting sod from the ground and sacking it up to create a place to stay, and eventually, you know, make a log cabin or make, you know, and so on like that. So it's going to be back to simple living. May not be very luxurious, but it depends on the skills that we have. So I'm encouraging everybody, learn the skills that you're going to need, particularly how to work with the things that nature gives. Okay, not to, we have to go back to the very beginning. So hemp, wonderful plant. The fibers of hemp, if you have any hemp clothing, if you have anything, it's such a nice material. Feels so nice on the body. Or cotton, or linen, or wool. Well, you've got a lot of sheep down there in New Zealand, right? Learn how to card wool and, you know, make clothing from it. So that's how you start. We have to go back to figuring out how to work with what nature has given us and begin from there. Okay, is that all right?
Yeah, the other thing is that, like in New Zealand, for example, and I think it's the same all around the world with Agenda 2030 and the control that is increasing, the noose that's tightening around our necks, is that there are also a lot of laws in place which prevent us from being allowed, inverted commas, to do a lot of these things, like methods of building, for example. That's one example. The other thing I wanted to say is that I hear what you're saying. I totally agree. I've been working in this direction for a long time myself, but my observation, this is coming back to people being able to cooperate, and people are lacking these skills, and I see it as a result of the dependence on the digital paradigm that we've been channeled towards. And a lot of people who have this idea of living in community come to community still with the idea that the skill that they're bringing is a digital skill. And, you know, that's not entirely bad. We're using a digital paradigm at the moment to have this conversation, but a lot of people have become kind of lazy, if you like they want the result of, you know, of this change, but they don't perceive, they seem unable to perceive what's required of them actually to get there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly correct. It's like, you know, we're all like children. You know, your child, you know, they don't know where food comes from, right? They don't know dad has to work, or, you know, there's a story, you know, it's just all of a sudden, you know, it's time to eat. Mom put something on the table, and, you know, what a wonderful world. And to an extent, we're all like children like that. At least, of course, you know, we're consciously aware that the world is not that simple, but we live like that. And in the past, and my experience with establishing alternative communities, I see the same thing, that people, they don't go to the village, they go out to the country and they bring the city with them. So we bring our cars, we bring our cell phones, we bring our computers, we bring the city there to the village, and we try to live that same lifestyle. But, you know, we're going to get a rude awakening. I mean, a lot of people even still don't see the handwriting on the wall. There's few that do, and what you're called a conspiracy theorist, right? If I try to have a conversation like this with my adult children, you know, they think dad's, you know, he's been watching too many of these, you know, conspiracy movies or something. No, it's reality. So how's it going to happen? We have to find our tribe. It really comes down to that. And again, I want to give a shout out to Booty. He's doing his best, try to, you know, bring everybody together. For all of you there in New Zealand who are on the call, you know, the efforts stem from him, his initiative. But, you know, one thing that I'm afraid of is there's not enough young people on this call, especially young men. And, you know, they're the ones who are living in the digital world, unfortunately. Maybe they're still playing digital games or something like that. So yeah, we have to be ringing the bell, right? The clarion call to try to get everybody to wake up. How can we do it? I don't know. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, and we have to find people of like mind who are on the same page, right? All of us here, but unfortunately we're scattered around the world. But in our neighborhood, and then what the other thing we have to do is we have to pray. There is a God, and God is a maintainer of all living beings. The demons, they like to think that they're controlling the world, and they've got their plan for their Agenda 2030. But the astrologers tell us that we're moving into a spiritual age, and this material civilization is going to go down, and from the ashes, a spiritual civilization is going to grow. So we are the pioneers bringing that spiritual age. We are on the cusp of that. We are going through the transition. The end of things is not always nice, right? The fall of the Roman civilization, if you look at the fall of any civilization, it's not nice. A lot of people are going to suffer. But, you know, we should make it, we should do what we can to try to help people understand changes are coming. And then we pray and we depend on the Lord. And I believe that we will see miracles happen. Those who are surrendered to the Lord will be taken care of by the Lord. Generally, of course, we think that means, you know, God's going to save my bacon. But it may not be that. You know, everybody has to leave this world at some time, and it may come to that. Okay, so what? What else is new, right? Death happens. The thing to do is to live our lives, to use our energy and live the lives to the best of our ability while we're here. How death comes, we'll see. But let's do what we can while we can. Is that Jenny got her hand up again? Jenny? Hi, Jenny. Okay. What do you got?
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. This is just so inspiring. I'm so excited that somebody of stature in the Hare Krishna movement is speaking in this way.
Thank you. I'm happy that you're here also. I've been speaking like this for 30 years, and a lot of times I don't get a lot of respect. But anyway, I think that'll change.
Yeah.
What do you have?
So you've answered lots of my questions, but I just wanted to elaborate. You know, everywhere we're hearing it says grow food, and the kind of complacency of us as individuals, depending on how awake we are. Some people are just thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to grow something in my little suburban garden. And somewhere along the line with this new awakening, the spiritual future that we are, the golden age that we are hoping for, that we'll be able to sustain living in suburban environment. Is that realistic?
The cities cannot function without oil. And that means electricity. That means that water has to be provided and waste has to go out. And as things break down, it's not likely that those things are going to happen. My spiritual master back in 1975 was telling us that their time will come when people will be fleeing the cities because they will become uninhabitable. Now, we saw that not too long ago in New York was a very interesting example where the mayor of New York just decided that, you know, everybody has to be locked up in the whole economy. And, you know, that city is, it's a, you know, if food doesn't come in 3 days and you can't live there, and there's millions of people in that situation. And then what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? So the cities will become extremely difficult, if not impossible, to live on. So the first thing then is to find a way to get outside of the city. Even if you're in the suburbs, perhaps it won't be as bad. In terms of growing food, you know, it's nice to have vegetables. They're tasty, but most of our food calories come from grain, and we have to understand that. And we have to practice, we have to learn how to grow grain. Now, there was one fellow, Gene Jevons, he has a book called How to Grow More Food on Less Land Than You Ever Thought Possible. His organization, they have a contest every year to see how much grain can be grown on a 10-foot by 10-foot patch of soil. And the last time I looked at that, well, more than 10 years ago, the record that they had was more than 100 pounds of grain on 10 feet by 10 feet, which is probably enough to feed a family of 4 for a good part of the year. So practice growing grain. You don't need a lot of room. Of course, you know, you have to feed the soil, condition the soil, double dig, whatever. But, you know, but you can, again, produce more food on less land than you ever imagined possible. We have to acquire that knowledge and those skills. So.
Thank you. My next question was, I like the idea that you explained of buying out of the system.
Yeah.
That we can't, yeah, so basically now why our funds have some value, that we should be buying items. So the question actually I wanted to direct possibly to Anutama and Billy, what kind of things, if you've been living as self-sustainably as possible for some time, what kind of things do we need to be thinking about in that regard?
Go ahead, Anutama, why don't you answer that?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm thinking more of your own, you say you're in the suburbs? You're living in the suburbs?
At the moment, yes, but planning, you know,
you may not have a lot of time. You may find yourself where you are. I mean, the way things are going quite quickly, but that's not the end of the world, because actually in the suburbs, you can keep a cow. Yeah, the regulations the way they are right now wouldn't allow you, but there is going to be a lot of chaos. So if you could just simply keep a cow and grow some potatoes, that part of it's taken care of. In terms of security, your best security is like, I keep honeybees, and their security is having a real strong hive. Nobody messes with the hive that has a lot of confidence, you know, and resources and things. So even in the suburbs, if you can get to know who the Kshatriyas are, you know about Kshatriyas, right?
No, explain that.
Okay, but anyway, if you
strong, brave men.
Yeah, and I have neighbors, and we've talked about it, and they've taught me how to shoot guns. And it's like what we do is we identify them, and we identify the Vaishyas, and then we set ourselves up as being the Brahmins, because we have all the knowledge. We know how to put in the right kind of living, and when it comes down, you're going to be where you are. I honestly, there's really no time to buy a farm at this point with gas prices going up the way. And they've got now monkeypox in England, and monkeypox is identical to smallpox. And this is inevitable because smallpox follows a siege, and we've just had a 2-year siege. And after a siege, people will develop the symptoms of healing, which is, you know, smallpox. They say this has been eradicated, but it's tested by the PCR test, and the symptoms are identical to measles and chickenpox. So, and monkeypox, they're all the same thing. So anyway.
I'd like to say something else, if I might interrupt. It's not necessary that we have to depend solely on ourselves. There's a lot of people with money in this world who don't know what to do with it. And there's a lot of people who go along with a program that the World Economic Forum and all those kind of people have developed, because they don't understand, they can't see a better solution. They, there's good people, but they're thinking within the box. They're thinking, how are we going to save the world and continue to live the same way that we're living? Well, that's not possible, okay? But they have to be introduced the idea that we have to change the way that we're living, and by doing that, that's the solution to all of the problems. The thing is, we have to talk, and we have to explain that there are answers, there are solutions to these things, and we have to come together and understand what they are. People who have a lot of money, they're freaking out too, right? But if they see, oh, here's somebody that knows what to do, and I can, they can provide the leadership that we need, then they'll come and they'll give what they have. If you know how to grow food and they have the money, then together you're a good team. They'll buy the land and you produce the food. So we have to make a lot of noise, right? And we have to try to make as many people aware as possible that there are solutions, but they're not going to come from the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, or any of those kind of people. But we have to give people confidence that there is a way out of this situation, and we know how to get there. Okay, so let's let that go at that, if it's okay. Thank you, because I want to see we've got. We're a little past our hour and a half that I had scheduled. If there's any other burning questions or comments, we can do that. Shirley, Mr. Baines, you have to unmute yourself. You're muted.
Left corner.
There you go. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. How long do you see this time of distress going on? Because I understand that there's going to be the tribulation. Israel's going to make agreement to have peace for 7 years. Halfway through the 7 years, the enemy's going to break the pact, and then Israel's going to have the time of Jacob's trouble, or the tribulation, the great one. And then I understand the Lord Jesus Christ is going to come back to set up the millennium, so that there will be peace and blessing, and all the things that we really desire will develop for that time for 1,000 years, until Satan's released again to come and cause trouble for a little while. And then we go on to a new situation, I understand. Over.
Okay. I don't think I put in my emails to you that I'm writing a blog also. It's called How Then Shall We Live? It's on Substack. I'll try to remember to put that link in the email that I send out to you next. And I'm doing that blog because we are going to be going into a spiritual culture, and then I want to be part of that conversation. Is how is that different from what we do now? Now, every religious tradition has their understanding of what the future holds. I did write a piece on my blog about, which way to the future. Different people have different ideas. The Christians, you're speaking from a Christian perspective, that's my religious tradition. The Vedic perspective, is somewhat different, but by and large, basically the same way. That the materialistic civilization is in decline, will collapse. Maybe there'll be a world war, maybe not, but there's going to be hard times ahead. And but because there is a God, he will take care of the people who are, let's say, qualify themselves to be part of that spiritual age. In other words, there's going to be a winnowing. Not everybody's qualified to live in a spiritual culture. And okay, so those that aren't, they can move on to go to a place where they can live according to their own desires. Nothing wrong with that. We're all spiritual beings. We go through many, many lifetimes, and let them move on and go somewhere where they can do what they like to do. But the future that's slated for this planet is a spiritual culture. I get, let's say, the window that I'm looking through is that of the Vedic astrologers. They're projecting basically a 7-year tribulation. And one of the astrologers that I follow, she said that by 2024, we should be hunkered down in a place where we can make a go of it. So that's a very short window of time. We've got basically a year and a half to 2 years to get ourselves fixed up. Again, this is why we have to make some noise. We have to find our tribe. We have to get together. We have to learn the skills. There's a lot of work to do. And, but, you know, so we have to take action. It's not a time of business as usual. We just sit back and, do what we, do today what we did yesterday. Today has to be different. Otherwise, tomorrow's going to be the same as yesterday. So what are we going to learn today to make tomorrow different?
Could I just also say that I have been endeavouring to prepare in case I have to go through this tribulation, the great one. I've been getting tyres for my bike. I've been getting tap washers so I can help the community when their tap seat packs up. I've got tools to do things. I'm trying to get the property to such a state that it should be able to last a length of time. So I'm not anticipating doing a lot of new building during this coming time. I anticipate having to keep going with the materials that we have. I'm in the process of putting in water tanks at this time because I am not aware of what the government is going to force into the water supply to the people. We're endeavouring to go to solar power at this time. You don't need a lot of solar power if you want to maintain lighting in your house and just use a few small appliances. But we're doing a bit more because I would like to be able to keep a freezer going. We're getting stuff so that we can cook food on a barbecue that's wood from off our property so that we can still cook. We've got a large Dixie so that we can cook for a group of people when we need to. And that is the way that we're trying to get to prepare for helping a group of people at this time.
Wonderful.
And
but Shirley, yeah.
Yeah, yesterday I had the privilege of running a sustainable garden workshop in our home. We had 14 participants from a like-minded group in this area.
Great.
And I've been doing organic gardening for about 18 years now. And we covered it. We had a 3-hour teaching session and they went around my garden afterwards. But these people were all very passionate in our supportive community. We aren't on any big acreage. There's just us on our 1 acre, but we can be largely self-sufficient. And we were helping people to learn to grow their own food. And I was very interested how you said that it's important to learn to grow grains, because I showed them the legumes that I had grown 8 years ago and were still in perfectly good condition. And I've been growing corn to grind up and make tortillas. And I was working out how many I'm going to need for a whole year. And then saving seeds, all that sort of thing. So we had the privilege of running that workshop yesterday. And because of the demand, I'm going to run another one.
Great. Well, you folks are a real inspiration.
Yeah.
You're a very good example. Thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And again, I want to encourage you to make some noise, advertise, take the lead, inspire people. You can inspire others by your action, by what you've done. Billy and Utama, same thing. Whoever's taken action, you become the leaders, because there's a lot of people, as they wake up, as they see what's going on, they're going, we need help. And so wave your flag so that they know where to go to get the help. And again, everybody, we need to pray, and we need the help of God.
Yeah.
We are in the battle between the godly and the godless, and we need the help of God on our side.
Yeah.
So pray daily for God's grace and help.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're going to end now. I'll be sending out the video. Hopefully I can get it done today. I seem to have a good internet connection today, so that's not always the case. And I'll attach, along with that email, I'll give you the link for the video. I'll give you a link for the various homework assignments. Next week, we're going to discuss different kinds of economies and what that means. Now, I'm giving a homework assignment which can be a little bit challenging, in which we need to understand there's different kind of people in this world, and the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedic literature, they explain these different kinds of people according to the different material influences, which are called the modes of material nature. I'm going to be sending you a chapter from my spiritual economics book that explains these gunas, or modes of material nature. Please try to get through that and get a handle on that. It's, let's just say, everything that we touch in the material world has an effect or influence on our consciousness. Everything that we eat, the time of day that we're awake, the activity that we do, where we go, the kinds of food that we eat and drink, everything has an effect on our consciousness that either lifts our consciousness up or degrades our consciousness. And these influences, again, called the gunas, or modes of material nature, all of us have become conditioned by our previous activities to a particular way of thinking and understanding. And this leads to different kinds of cultures. So I want to get into a discussion of that next week. Do your best to try to read through that material. It doesn't matter that you understand it completely. We will discuss it. But it has an influence in terms of understanding the different kinds of work that people do and the different kinds of cultures in the world. So we're going to also, I'm going to be giving some examples of previous cultures, indigenous cultures of the world, how they lived, and the character of those cultures according to the modes of material nature. So this might be a little challenging. I hope it's not too challenging. Read it over and write down all your questions. Bring your questions with you, and we'll go through it. And it's an important step for us to understand how the world works and how we can make it work to everyone's advantage. Money economy works for the advantage of some at the expense of many. We want to create a society, a world in which everybody is taken care of, in which nobody is neglected. And so we have to understand how people work and how the world works in order to get there from here. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you again for your attention, for your coming, for your participating in this. I am very grateful to have your association here. God bless you all, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Wow.
Bye.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.